This week on the docket, we welcome our first live studio audience and also two extraordinary women, ALEX+SINK and JULIE+HOLT. Exclusive interviews with them. The On the Docket starts right now.
From the HCC+PRODUCTIONS Broadcast Center in Ybor City, this is On the Docket with FELIX+VEGA.
Hello everyone and welcome to a very special edition of On the Docket. I'm FELIX+VEGA. Today we have an amazing show, as I mentioned, with two very extraordinary and influential women. One is a former CFO of the state of Florida, a successful executive, and now the chairwoman of the Florida Next Foundation. The other, our own Hillsborough County Public Defender, and also the last line of defense for many people in this county. Please welcome ALEX+SINK and JULIE+HOLT. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Alex, I want to start with you. It's something you said when we first met in August, and I thought it was very surprising. You told a group of us at the Ybor Coalition meeting here in Ybor that there isn't a day that you don't wake up and think about one specific day, November 2nd of 2010, election night, the morning after that. There was only 61,550 votes separated you and Rick Scott. How did that affect you, and how does that still affect you when you think about it today?
Well, losing is not fun. And
no, never.
I think, the way that it affects me today is that literally not a day goes by, Felix, that someone doesn't approach me and make a comment about how distressed they are about the direction of our state and how much most of them were supporters of mine, but others are, frankly, people who say, you know, I don't know you, but I just have to tell you I'm sorry because I voted for the wrong person. I wish I could take my vote back, but of course it's too late. But the bigger point is this issue of seeing that our state is so full of so many assets, and we have so many opportunities, and we have so much talent in our state, and yet we still are a little bit in the doldrums. And so that's why I formed the Florida Next Foundation to put together a policy think tank and an institute that will convene people to talk about how we really rebuild the Florida economy in a different way.
And it's interesting because I think the lesson to be learned from that is also a very good one to spread to other people, is that moving forward and taking the next step and doing something with your life. It was interesting, the Florida Next Foundation, just to read your mission statement, is to empower young people, entrepreneurs, and small businesses so they can drive the innovation needed to enhance Florida's economy and the quality of life. Why was it so important to you to switch from maybe gearing up for another election or running for another office and focusing on a nonprofit like you did and creating the Florida Next?
Well, actually, I went from the example of Jeb Bush. He lost his first governor's election, and he felt very passionate, and still does to this day, 20 years later, about the issue of education. I don't happen to agree with him on every one of his issues, but he took that passion and transformed it into something bigger than just the next election. And when I stepped back and thought about, what do I hear from Floridians and what am I passionate about? I am very passionate about advocating for entrepreneurs and innovators and young people, because Florida's a place where we're all immigrants from some other place, or our families were. And this is a place where people have come to realize their dreams. We were just talking earlier, you're a serial entrepreneur. I hope you'll tell the audience. I'll turn the tables and interview you about all the many things that you're involved in. And this whole notion is that we can't go back to just being a tourist state or just waiting for the next real estate bubble. We have to build an economy built on real sustainable jobs and good paying jobs, quality jobs. It's not so much the quantity, but the quality of jobs. And ensuring that our young people, like the people here at HCC, not all of whom are so young people, but they're back here trying to remake themselves, have the opportunities to find meaningful work that will sustain a family.
And that's a good point, because I mentioned this the last time we did interviews with Elizabeth Belcher and Gail Gottlieb when we got on the topic of HCC in particular. And do you see the people that you talk to, like myself, I went back to school to chart a new course and a new career, and that seems to be the common theme that I'm encountering with my students as well. Are you seeing that as well? in the people
Definitely.
You're meeting?
I'm glad you brought that up because I do a number of small business roundtables around the state and ask, what are your issues? So they say things like, well, access to capital or rising insurance premium costs for my employees or regulation. But the fourth thing they mention is we're having a hard time finding people to hire
Right.
with the skills that we need. And there's something wrong with this picture if we're sitting here with, pick a number, 9% unemployment, but yet employers over and over again, from small businesses to large businesses, are saying, we can't find people with the right talents. And so that's why it's imperative, particularly that our community colleges are the places where people of all ages have to feel that they can come back to school here and kind of remake themselves. But the critical issue is, are we teaching and directing our students into the jobs truly of the 21st century? We can't be, I heard in Miami the other day that the community college is teaching an old computer language that only Microsoft is still using. So therefore, Microsoft from Seattle is literally down in Miami-Dade County hiring people to go to Seattle to work, when what we need is we need to be teaching our young people, our people who are back in school, the languages of the 21st century, not
Right.
the 20th century.
And that's also interesting because you actually have had several different careers. Obviously, you were very successful at Bank of America. You were, correct me if I'm wrong, you were executive, you were president at one point
Right.
of Bank of America, and then you decided to leave that job, go into public service. What was the defining moment for you that you decided, okay, I've done this, I've enjoyed it, and now let me move on to something else? How did that work?
Well, I left banking in the year 2000. I was offered an early retirement package, and I was really ready to go and do something different after 26 years of being in the same company. Although, I must say, I had 16 different jobs.
Within Bank of America?
Within Bank of
Wow.
America in 26 years. So
you get very busy.
I was very busy, and I learned a lot about a lot of different areas of banking. But I was ready to retire from them and kind of remake myself. And in the process, I got, after helping my husband who ran for governor, I learned a little bit about the political environment and how to put together a campaign.
Just
Made
a
a lot of
smidge.
friends, just a little bit. And a couple of years after that, I literally had some friends call me. We know these friends. Betty Castor,
Right.
our very own former USF president, and her husband Sam Bell, called me and said, Alex, you need to run for this CFO position in the state of Florida. And I said, what? What's that?
And that wasn't even really, that was something that was created
It was
within the past few
created.
years.
It was created, and we had only had the position for 4 years. And my predecessor, Tom Gallagher, was really, he was elected without opposition, so the people of Florida really didn't know very much about it. So I started learning about that position. And when I recognized that all those things I had done for 26 years and all that community involvement and being involved in the Nature Conservancy or being involved in children or heading up the Hillsborough Education Foundation and supporting public education, those were things that were applicable to this CFO position. There was just one little problem, Felix.
What was that?
I had to become a political candidate and run for office and put myself out there, and Julie knows all about this, for your 20-plus years of experience of running for office and asking people to contribute to your campaign, donate, and communicate with people. But I knew that if I was able to win and get in that job, I could make a real difference. And I'm thrilled at the 4 years of experience I had serving the people of Florida in Tallahassee.
And then once you finished your tenure in Tallahassee, CFO actually, and you ran for governor, what was the impetus for your campaign? I know obviously you were wildly popular with Democrats, Republicans, Independents. Obviously the race was so close. What really was the driving force behind your candidacy for governor?
The driving force was definitely turning our economy around. And while it's not just the governor or just state government that does that, because I think a lot has to come from the private sector and also from the federal government, but shining a light on what the new Florida can be, and capturing, just like I said at the very beginning, capturing and I put together a very rich platform of ideas and ways to focus on. My whole focus was on support for small businesses and entrepreneurs, because I think for all those years of thinking that some big Fortune 500 company is going to move their headquarters to Tampa,
And make it all very easy.
that's not the way we grow, and it shouldn't be the way we grow. I'd rather have 400 small businesses be confident enough to hire 2 more people rather than have that one company show up here, because most of the times in the past they're just chasing low wages, and then like Solomon Brothers did, after a few years of being here, they just checked out and moved all their jobs to Indonesia or India or wherever it was they moved. We don't want that.
And especially,
I focused on entrepreneurs, small businesses, because I believe that we ought to grow our own.
and especially at that time in 2010 when you were running, and even the run up to the election the year before, is really, we're going to talk about unemployment a little bit later in the show, but we started to see that run up where unemployment was going up and up and up, and people were starting to have to say, okay, I've lost my job, now what do I do? And so I think it was important that you pointed out to encourage small businesses as well. But Julie, let me bring you into the conversation and put you on the hot seat, so to speak. First off, full disclosure to everyone watching, we've known each other for a very long time. We're on opposite sides of the courtroom. Obviously, we're not going to talk about any of our cases between our offices, but really focus on your career and what some of the issues that you deal with on a daily basis. You've been elected public defender every 4 years since 1993. What is the biggest change that you've seen in the legal community and the legal system here in Tampa since you've been public defender?
Well, the biggest change as far as the criminal defense bar and the challenges that we have is the level of really high crime areas, and also a level of violence that we didn't have 20 years ago. Right now, everyone's reaction seems to be driven by one of 3 things: anger, substance abuse, or mental health problems. And those 3 things have really driven a lot of what's going on in Hillsborough County for criminal activity. And then the second thing that's happened drastically for those of us that are either in the state attorney's office or in the public defender's office is having to deal with what I consider to be more difficult cases, more difficult sentencing schemes with really a reduced budget. And it makes it very difficult to keep what I consider to be qualified attorneys that have been there for a long period of time on both sides of the aisle, so that we can really provide both offices good quality representation of those issues that we're supposed to be advocating for. So those are the 2 biggest challenges that I think we have over the last 20 years.
And you supervise over 100 attorneys in your office, and we were talking on stage before we started. The number of attorneys that you have has actually gone up since you've been in office. How did you manage to increase it with a lot of other offices, even like my own, having to slash positions or really merge positions together? How did you make that work?
Well, I was building for several years. The last 5 or 6 years, that's where the challenge has really come into. And when Alex was talking about the 21st century and the things that you have to do, we decided to go virtual in our office so that if a support person left the office, we could change that position into more of an attorney position. And I just had to focus on that because the number of homicide cases increased, the number of cases that we had dealing with difficult long-term representation of clients, such as in trafficking and in RICOs. All those cases were growing, and you have to have more attorneys. The caseloads have to be dwindled down a little bit because you do need more time, more effort, more quality put into cases. So I really didn't have an alternative. I just had to figure out how to use the dollar better, and I think we've been successful at that. I am finally, Mark and I laugh all the time, the big boss over at your office. We laugh all the time that I've actually gotten to the point where I'm almost on a 1-for-1 with the attorneys, and your caseload is a little greater than mine, and so clearly that is a benefit that our office has achieved.
And let me pop in and say the power of technology.
Yes.
The fact you couldn't do this without the fact that your attorneys can now be more self-sufficient because of the power of all the technology that they have.
And I have
Even in my husband's law office, he doesn't have an assistant anymore.
And we've actually moved to
does his own typing and does his own stuff, and it's really changed the way we work in this country.
E-filing is another thing that's come into existence.
E-filing will certainly help us all, and the thing that I found, though, is that Hillsborough County is a tremendous partner with both of our offices, as a matter of fact.
Absolutely.
And moving forward with technology, they have been great. even during the times where things have been difficult with the dollars, they've understood that the commitment of the dollars here in Hillsborough County will help them. We do video conferencing so that we can video conference with our clients that are in the Hillsborough County Jail, which helps everybody from a budgetary standpoint.
It is surprising, a lot of people that don't know how the inner workings of our offices and the legal system work. Yes, it is an adversarial process, but there is a lot of give and take in working together, working with the attorneys, even in the courtroom level. For example, when we had the Republican National Convention here in town, that was a joint effort, not only with your office, our office, all law enforcement, in order to make sure that the onslaught of people that we thought were going to be representing and prosecuting, that thankfully didn't happen. But talk to us about how important it is in your relationship, not only with the state attorney, but what you see on the statewide level. Are those relationships like that everywhere else as well?
They are not. I really do find Hillsborough County to be unique. Who would have ever thought that during the RNC I would have had my physical office in the Hillsborough County Jail, right where everything was going to happen? They provided me office space. They provided me the hookups for everything that we needed for our office to maintain itself. With your office, every time we decide, hey, we need to try to go even a little more virtual, all you have to do is your IT people meet and you decide, here's how we can do it, where it's seamless, where no one will suffer from it. And it doesn't matter if my office is ready for what you're doing or if you're ready for what I'm doing, we find a way to make it work because we realize how important that is. And I think the collaboration here is we want to improve whatever we're doing. We want to improve it constantly. We don't believe we do the best job every single day because we know that we do the best job we can that day, but tomorrow we can do better. And all of us meet and come together for that purpose. And you're right, we're adversaries in the courtroom, but what I like is that when we walk away, big picture, we
Right.
care about our community. We're vested in our community, is what you're saying. Build your community and build the strength of your community, and everybody benefits from that.
And speaking of building, and we're talking about your attorneys that you wanted to keep, and also we encountered the same problem in the state attorney's office a lot, and this is a national problem as well. I was doing some research about this issue because it's something that I've taken personally over the years to figure out how people like me and a lot of my colleagues, we would love to stay at the state attorney's office and be prosecutors. I went to law school to be a prosecutor. That's what I wanted to do. And also, I found a study in Wisconsin, the University of Wisconsin, and along with the Wisconsin Bar Association, did a comprehensive study of district attorneys' offices in that state to figure out why people are leaving and what were the retention problems. Number one reason was tied to salary on 3 different fronts: merit, pay, the cost of living, and higher salaries in private sector. What's the biggest challenge you and other public defenders and state attorneys face when you're trying to keep the people that want to stay longer, but simply because they have family, and we're going to talk about student loan debt in a second, what do you do to encourage them to stay on, and what do you wish you could do for them?
The first thing is in the hiring, why do you want the respective jobs? Because you have got to be passionate about the job you're getting ready to take on. Because the second sentence that Mark and I are going to tell our people is, there is not a whole lot of money that I am going to be able to give you over the next several years because I'm really not in control of that. There has not been any cost of living money for either of our respective offices, or really across the state for the offices. We're getting ready to do our 6th year.
And that affects it because we're actually losing money every year personally and individually.
Right.
Well, especially when you think about it. When you think about, yes, my gas is going up, my insurance is going up, all the things that you have out there that you have to do, everything's going up. And our pay, for all practical purposes, not only did we not get a cost of living, but as you know, the 3% that each of us had to take out for the retirement system. And I know that's a very controversial subject for some people, but when you think about it, our salaries have always been, in the government work, our salaries have always had the benefit package that made it worthwhile.
Right.
If you're out there in the private sector, you had the same types of things that we have as a government employee. They do create a 401k for you, or they give you the IRAs, or they pay for your insurance, or they pay for your Florida bar dues. And the salaries are higher to begin with. Starting salaries for attorneys right now in our offices, our respective offices, $40,000,
Right.
3% off the top goes to your Florida retirement, and then you have the rest of your deductions. If you go to a private practice right now, starting salaries there are $75,000 and above. The economy has started to go up there, but we're not seeing the same thing for government work. And I believe that the commitment to being in public service in the government right now is probably at the lowest point for appreciation by everyone. And I think that brings in a morale issue among your respective offices. And that's where we struggle now, is we have to make you feel appreciated without the monetary compensation.
And when you go to Tallahassee and you go advocate for the public defender's office and your attorneys, what is the general reception? Do they understand the problem in the legislature, that there isn't enough money and we can't keep cutting away from not only your attorneys but also any government attorney, because they do serve a valuable purpose?
Yes. Well, what I really do now is I advocate for the system as a whole, because right now the way our offices get funding is if the state attorneys get $1, we get 50 cents. So it behooves
wow.
me. It behooves me to encourage funding for the state attorney's office right now.
To
So
get more
I want you to know I'm up there for you and for our office. But that is the way the funding is set up, and what we try to explain to them. And I spent a lot of time last year with doing that. I took the time to do a survey of basically the big law firms here in Hillsborough County to say, here's the disparity between what you're being told versus what reality is. And we did a survey internally of our office, and most of those attorneys have student loan indebtedness of over $100,000. You only have the 1-year deferment.
Right.
And so with the 1-year deferment, you then find yourself, here's what an apartment costs, here's what a car payment costs. And we're talking about, I take them car payments for buying something like a $14,000 car or $15,000. Right. And you show how that $40,000, you're in debt. You're in debt on top of it. Kids are getting into credit card debt as a result of that. You're borrowing more money from your parents. It's just not feasible. And you're absolutely right that if you don't have, and here's what I tell them, you never want a criminal justice system where you have to redo cases because you don't have the quality up front. And I encourage them, and it's both sides, we need good lawyers that don't have to worry about where's the next paycheck coming from or how am I going to deal with this lack of money in my life. You need people that can focus on making sure that we treat every single case as if it's the only case, because the victims, the witnesses, the defendant, everyone, no one needs to be in a redo.
And let me bring in a business argument for this, is that businesses have to be really concerned about having access to the courts, and because of this lack of funding and defunding, it's taken longer to get the cases handled through the system. And if you don't have experienced state attorneys and experienced public defenders, then a business who has a case or is trying to get some redress for a wrong is losing money.
Right.
Because the cases can't be expedited, and the quality of the lawyers on either side is not as good as it should be.
And it's a good point. I wanted to ask you, Julie, as far as the experience gap that you were talking about, and the economy obviously took a toll not only on the people that you represent, but also on the private sector, private attorneys.
Oh, yeah.
I know several attorneys have come back to your office because they could not sustain private practice. How have you seen the economy affect a spike in the number of clients that you have?
You know, interestingly enough, I didn't see what I thought I would. I didn't see an increase or a spike in the theft cases or worthless checks, but what I did see is the environment that people are living in is, I think, a big reason why there is this anger and this sense of desperation out there, and people are finding themselves, number one, turning to perhaps the criminal life of selling drugs, which, as we all know, is a horrendous problem that we can't let our community get tied up in. And the other, though, is the robberies. The robberies. Armed robberies are really out of control, which usually lends itself to a firearm and lends itself to violence, which lends itself to the homicide.
And it becomes a slippery slope.
And which then, obviously, for your office and mine, those are those high-level cases where you have to have the experienced lawyers trying the cases, and you're desperate, really, to try and maintain high-level attorneys that have a significant experience, because those cases require more work, more due diligence. You really have to deal with the complicated sentencing schemes, and you don't want those errors being made. And a lot of the errors that are made from an appellate standpoint, if you really did an analysis of it, a lot of it is probably a lack of experience on how to handle the complicated situations. So there wasn't the old grab the gas and run off or anything like that, but you see it in the more violent situations.
And as far as the talking about student loan debt, there was a Pew Research study that came out this week that showed the 2010 average student loan debt in this country for individuals was $26,682. That was just the average. For 10% of the debt, which is now over $1 trillion in this country that's owed for student loans, more than 10% of those people had $61,000 or more in student loan debt. And inside the numbers like we were talking about, we don't have unions for the attorneys, and the starting salary is $40,000. What about the idea of loan forgiveness? Has that ever been, and Alex, you can speak to this also, being in Tallahassee, has that ever gained any traction? Because I've seen bill after bill come up over the years, and all of a sudden it's just like, oh, student loan forgiveness, it's coming for government attorneys, and then poof, it's gone, and we never hear about it again.
Oh, that's a tough issue, because when you start talking about loan forgiveness, that means that whoever made the loan, whether it was a private source or a governmental source, is going to have to write off those debts. And I think that there ought to be maybe some incentives. So for example, for somebody who's willing to go and make a career as a public defender at these much lower salaries, then I think it is appropriate for the system to look at as an incentive to keep these people in public service. We will be able to perhaps reduce some of your loan payments. The Obama administration did pass a legislation, I believe, that no more than a student doesn't have to pay more than 10% of their income against their federal loan payment. So that does provide some relief, but this is an incredible problem. And I was thinking about this as you warned us that we were going to talk about it. I think it's imperative on the part of students to be financially literate and to think seriously about, okay, if I take out this loan or if I take this additional debt out in order to further my education, am I getting a degree, or am I getting the kind of education that I need to get a job that will enable me to repay that kind of obligation? And I'm not sure our students really think that far ahead.
In advance, right. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to take a couple audience questions. I also want to talk about the unemployment situation and our big question of the week for both of you. So stay with us. And welcome back to our special edition of On the Docket. We're here at Hillsborough Community College in the Mainstage Theater. We're back with our guests, JULIE+HOLT and ALEX+SINK. We want to take a couple questions from the audience right now. I know a lot of people have had questions. We've had a very lively discussion so far this afternoon. So we can get, if you have a question for Alex or Julie, stand up and say your name, and the camera and mic guy will come to you.
Hi, I'm Catherine, and I want to know what your stance is on environmental policies and anything you would like to change in 2014.
Environmental policies? Oh, let me
Don't
get
you
this
started.
down. Don't get me started. I think that is one of the reasons that we all love living in Florida is because of the fantastic environment we have. And this state has been literally at the forefront of a number of environmental policies, one of which has been the program that we've had for 20 years, Florida Forever, which set aside between $200 and $300 million every year to buy environmentally sensitive lands, to set aside parklands. And of course, during the tough budget times, that money has been taken away, and probably rightfully so in this kind of environment. But as our economy comes back, we need to think about resuming, just setting aside, just like we would in our own personal budget, setting aside some monies to continue to protect environmentally sensitive lands. And it's not only for the enjoyment of the public. There are critical water issues that we're going to have as a state. As we grow, water is going to be an enormous issue, and many of these preserved lands protect our sources of water. So I consider myself to be a strong advocate for the environment, environmental issues. I think Florida, the Sunshine State, we ought to be the Sunshine State because we're the #1 state to capture the power of solar energy. And putting in place policies that will provide incentives to homeowners and commercial property owners to really capture the power of solar power in a state like Florida
It also
is
creates more
critically
jobs.
important. And
Right.
it creates enormous numbers of jobs. I mean, New Jersey beats us by far because they have the right incentives in place and they have created tens of thousands of jobs in that one state that are related to converting ourselves to more solar power.
Clearly driven by Jersey Shore, too. Snooki in the situation on unemployment. We have another question from the audience.
Hi, Dustin Wallen. I'm a computer engineering student. What I've really seen in my field, it's hard to find jobs for which I'm really qualified for. Directed towards Alex, what are you going to do, say, like in Tampa or Tallahassee, to keep people my age like searching for jobs?
Well, one of the things we have to do is you stood up and said that you're a computer engineering student, and we hear over and over again this talk about STEM and STEM degrees. That means science, technology, engineering, and math. I personally would be calling them, we need more STEAM degrees, science, technology, engineering, the arts, and math, because there's a whole creative side to building jobs for the 21st century. And if we are graduating computer engineering students that are not able to find jobs, then we're doing something very wrong. And in fact, when I talk to employers, they complain all the time. They can't find the right kind of IT help or support. And what I hear from students is, well, I can't get a job because they say that I have to have experience.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I've learned in looking at some other states is the power of internships. I would
Absolutely.
put in place a program to encourage our private employers to agree to hire a certain number of student interns, so that those interns can, and they should be paid, they should come into these businesses as interns on a short-term basis, just get that that hands-on job experience, so that when you do graduate, Dustin, you have a job waiting for you.
I think that translates even in our business, because I know in the paralegal program, we have Dr. Sheila Merchant, who runs our programs, in the audience. And the one thing that we stress more and more is internships, and also, especially in the paralegal program, getting them out into the workforce and preparing them for those things, even the undergraduate level, and not only when they go to law school. And I know your office, our office, we do the same thing. It was like, how invaluable was that experience for them?
Well, it is invaluable, and as Alex says, it's something that you can put on your resume that you've actually done, and we do it in every single field in our office, not just with the lawyers, and we have a volunteer program, and we also have intern paid and unpaid. A lot of them get school credit. It's credit hours for coming in, and we do that in the investigative area, we do it in our social services area, we do it in the support area, we do it in the paralegal area. We have these internships, and they get to stay with us for whether they want 6 months or a year. And at the end of it, we actually do something very detailed for them to let people know that are future employers. Here's what they did, here's what they learned, and here's the benefits.
That's fantastic. We have one more question from the audience.
Hi, my name is Thomas. This is for Ms. Holt. As we've seen in South Florida, there comes a time when the reduction in budgets and the increase in cases can sometimes lead to a point where you just cannot handle the number of cases that you have, and they refuse cases. Do you ever see a situation like that happening here in Hillsborough County? And if not, what can you do about it?
Well, I am very familiar with, obviously, the litigation that is going on right now out of the 11th Circuit Public Defender's Office. And then, number one, I need to applaud that office for taking that action, because it carries tremendous political hits for that person.
So our viewers are familiar, they actually had to stop taking cases that were supposedly going to be appointed to them.
They did. They told a trial judge there, we can't accept any more cases, and here's the cases that we've decided not to take any longer so that we can keep the more complicated cases. And it's pending right now for some final resolution, and we really think that what's going to happen is it's going to be sent back to the lower trial level to have further hearings down there. But I don't envision a situation here in Hillsborough County where I will achieve that point right now, but that's based on the budget that I have today. I think that we're at the critical point where we cannot, not any of the offices, whether it be public defenders or state attorneys, and frankly regional counsel, a lot of the offices that are part of the court system, we are critical at this point. We cannot accept any further budget reductions, and that's the letter that I'm going to send on behalf of all the 20 public defender offices this year when they do ask us to do the 10% further reduction. What we need to try to do instead is perhaps look for some alternative funding sources, which we're trying to do. And the other thing really is we need committed funding. We need committed funding for the court system as a whole. Some percentage of the budget has to be dedicated for access to the courts, for appropriate salaries, and for appropriate programs that are alternatives to prosecutions and things
And
of
that's
that
one
sort.
thing, real quick, because I know we're running short on time, but I want to get this in there because I think it's a very important issue. We talked about drug abuse, and prescription drug abuse is a huge, huge problem here in Florida anymore. And with those prescription drug cases, we see minimum mandatory sentences that are attached to them, when a lot of people are actually users and actual addicts.
Correct.
How are you seeing your office handle not only getting them the resources that they need, but also what do you think needs to be changed or tweaked about the drug trafficking statute so someone that is a true addict can get the help and not be facing 25 years in prison right out the gate?
I think we all have to sit down and be realistic and say, you know what, there are in fact, as you say, addicts and users, and we have to address the fact that right now, possession of a small number of pills or possession of a prescription bottle that doesn't belong to you carries, whether it be a 15-year or 25-year minimum mandatory. The cost of that to our state, the impact that that has on our communities has got to be realistically looked at. We are all for public safety. So number one, don't let anyone mislead you that we're not all for public safety, but we have to accept what the addiction component is. We have to accept that we have a responsibility to regroup and to pass laws that are more reflective, honestly, of our community standards and our community acceptance. We don't have to say, I want to be tough on crime to be tough on crime.
Great point. We'll take another quick break. We'll be back with our big question of the week for Alex and Julie right after this. And welcome back, everyone. We have just a couple minutes. We want to get to our big question of the week for ALEX+SINK and Julie Holt. Julie, let me start with you. You spent 20 years, as we said, as the public defender here in Hillsborough County. Do you plan on running again?
Yes.
Good. And what about further down the road? How many more times do you plan on running?
Well,
You thought about that?
that's a little harder, but I love this job, and as long as it's challenging, and as long as I'm doing a good job, and as long as I believe that I'm actually benefiting my community, I want to stay running for this particular job. I think it's a great job, and I think it's very rewarding.
And Alex, I have to end with you. The number one question people have asked me when they found out that you were coming on the show today, are you running for governor in 2014?
I don't know yet. I've left the door open and told many, many people who have encouraged me that after this election, after the first of the year, I'll make an evaluation. There are lots of things to think about. What we do know is that our state needs to be headed in a different direction.
What do you think is going to be the key thing to help you make that decision to push you over the hump, so to speak, and run for governor again?
Just as...
You know I'm going to press the issue a little bit.
Any decision has to be involve one's family. It has to, I have to think about the level of effort and the amount of support that I could get. And what we do know is that our current governor is very unpopular, rightfully so. He isn't leading our state in a direction that will enable us to adjust to the opportunities of the 21st century, and we should have a different governor.
All right, we'll leave it there. Hopefully you'll come back if you decide to announce. Give me the exclusive. That would be wonderful. ALEX+SINK, Julie Holt, thank you so much for joining us here on the docket. That's going to do it for us today from the Mainstage Theater here at Hillsborough Community College. Thanks to all of our production crew and our audience. We'll see you next time.